Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. Today we're going to be looking at displacement in Cinema 4D and how we can use it to create this cool icy landscape that you're looking at right now. We're also going to be creating the snow on the flatter plains, and the steeper slopes of the mountains are going to be without snow. So we're going to be using a terrain mask inside Cinema 4D to achieve that look. So let's get started on this. Here we go. So we're going to create a plane, and we're going to call this land, and we want to set the width and the height to be 1000 and 1000. For the width segments, we'll set that to 600, and the same for the height segments as well. Okay, so we're going to create a material for our land. We're going to call it land, and I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to turn on displacement and turn off reflectance. Let's add our land material to our land object, and let's create some displacement. Now make sure your displacement channel is ticked. Go to our texture triangle here, and let's go and create a layer shader, because we're going to be creating a bunch of noise shaders inside of that layer shader. So to create our first noise shader, just click on shader, go down to noise, and nothing's going to happen because you have to render. So now that we've rendered that, we can see we got some displacement going on, but it's a bit irritating for us to have to keep clicking on render every time we want to see our results. So what we can do is we can create a displacer deformer and make it a child of our land object. Now we want to tell our displacer deformer to read the displacement channel from our land texture. So to do that, with your displacer deformer selected, go into the shading tab, and let's set the channel here to displacement. Now our displacer object, our displacer deformer, is going to read the displacement channel from this texture tag once we drag it down. And now we're going to get live feedback when we make edits to our displacement. So set your displacer deformer in your object tab, set the height there to be about 150, and do the same in your land material. Set the height in the displacement channel to 150. Okay, so let's start playing with this and trying to get the effect we're going for. So let's open up our layer shader, and we can go into our noise, and let's actually go back and just reduce the opacity of this to about 4%. And now I want to create, I'm going to turn off my grid, and I want to create some mountainous slopes, so some peaks. So to do that, I'll create another noise shader, and let's go into it there, and we can first of all set the global scale to about 1000%. Now we're getting some nice peaks, so we can even go a bit higher. We'll go to 1200. Okay, maybe even to 1300. Okay, so now we got our peaks, but we don't want our peaks to cover the whole plane. We want to just have a few peaks here and a few peaks there with some flat areas. So we want to be able to control where our peaks are, and we're going to do that. If we just go back here one level, we're going to do that with a layer mask. So first of all, let's create a shader noise, and this is going to act as our layer mask. So we need to set it to layer mask, and we need to bring it beneath our shader that's causing our peaks. And now our layer mask is controlling where our peaks are. Now you can't really see what's going on at the moment, so let me just show you. If I open up this layer mask noise, and if I turn this off, so I'm going to set it all to black, that's basically turning it off, we're going to get no peaks. Now if I set this back to white, we're going to get peaks. Now what we can do is increase the scale here to, let's just say, 900. And now you can see wherever our white areas are, we're going to get peaks, and wherever our dark areas are, we're not going to get any peaks. So what we can do is bring up the low clip, and if we bring that right up, it's going to give us less white areas here in our noise. So the less white areas we have, the less peaks are going to be able to peek up through this layer mask. So I'm going to go back into the layer mask noise here, and I'm going to mess around with this low clip until I'm happy with it. So I'm going to go for about 50% on that. So now we got some nice flat areas. That's where our snow is going to be, and our peaks are going to be so steep that they're not going to be able to hold any snow. So I might actually reduce the amount of black here so that we're going to get more peaks and less flat plains. Yeah, so something like 42% on the low clip. Okay, so right now our snow is too bumpy, so I'm just going to go back, and I want to go into our noise here, our first noise that we created. I'm going to increase the global scale to 300. Okay, so that's looking better now. So let's now create our snow. We're going to create our snow, and it's going to settle here on our flat plains, and we're going to have a grayish color for our peaks. So how do we do that? We need to be able to tell our flat plains to be white and our steep surfaces here to be gray. So we're going to do that using a terrain mask. So if we go into our color channel and click on this triangle here beside texture, let's go down to effects and let's select terrain mask. Now we need to render this to see what it's actually doing, but first we want to turn off our displacer, and now we can turn on our interactive render region. Alt-R on your keyboard to do that. Let's drag this out to fit our window, and let's increase the render quality there. So you can see what's going on here. So it looks like we have some white patches where our geometry is flat, but where our geometry is steep, we're not getting anything. So we want to go in back into our land material, and let's go into our color channel, and let's go into this terrain mask. So before we do that, we're actually going to put this into a layer shader. So we can just click on this texture triangle here, and we can create a layer shader, and that will automatically put our terrain mask into the layer shader. Now let's go into our layer shader. You'll see the terrain mask is here. Now we're going to create a material for our snow. So let's go and click on shader and create a color shader. So snow is white, so we're going to leave it as is. We're going to set the terrain mask here to layer mask. So the next thing we need to do is create the color for our mountains. So let's create another shader, a color shader. Let's bring it beneath our terrain mask, and we can set the color of this to be mountain color. So everybody has a different opinion on what that should be. I mean, I was Googling mountains and they're kind of blackish grey in color. So I'm going to go for something like that. Bluish, blackish grey. Something like this, maybe. Okay, so that's fair enough for now. So now you can see that we have our snow on our flat areas of our geometry, and we got our mountain color on our steep areas of our geometry. So we can control where the snow will appear if we go into our layer shader in our color channel and then go into our terrain mask. So right now, let's just turn off altitude masking because we're just going to be dealing with slope masking. So right now, max slope is set to 45 degrees. So if we reduce that to 20 degrees, you're going to get snow on any surface that has a steepness less than or equal to 20 degrees. So let's set that to, let's say, 30 degrees. Maybe 25. Maybe just 22. Okay. So I'm happy enough with that, and we're going to move on. So the next thing we want to do is create some, maybe a bit more displacement for our mountains. So we can go into our displacement channel and go back into our layer shader, and let's create another noise. And let's reduce the opacity on that right down. And let's set the blending mode here to overlay. Let's actually try multiply. And maybe increase the opacity again. Okay, so I'm going to set the opacity here to 15%. The blending mode set to multiply. I'm going to go back into my color channel and into my layer shader, into my terrain mask. I'm going to reduce the max slope here to 20 degrees. And I'm going to leave it at that for now. Okay, so I want to create some bump now for our mountains. So if I go into my land material, I just want to create bump for our mountains and not our snow. Our snow is good as it is, really. We just need to focus on our mountains. So to do that, we can just grab our terrain mask shader that we have already set up, and that's going to give us control of our mountains here. So what we can do is go into our layer shader in our color channel, and let's just grab this terrain mask shader. I'm going to do a right click on it and go to copy shader, and then I'm going to go into my bump channel, make sure that's ticked on, and I'm going to create a layer shader in the bump channel. Go into the layer shader and I'm going to paste in the terrain mask. Okay, so now if we create some bump, let's see, create a noise. Now that's affecting our mountains and our snow. We need to set our terrain mask to be layer mask. Now it's just affecting our snow. So let's create a shader for our mountains. So we're going to create a noise shader. We're going to bring it beneath our terrain mask. Now we have bump that is affecting our mountains. So what I want to do is I want to go into that shader and set it to, I don't know, well, let's try electric. So that's kind of nice. Let's zoom in a bit. Yeah, that's pretty cool. If we reduce the scale to about 20, and let's see what that looks like. No, I'm going to leave it at 100%, and I'm happy enough with that. Now I also want to make sure that we don't have any bump in our snow. So to do that, we can set this here to 0%. And actually, let's just turn it off here. So let's see. Okay, so it's not actually turning off. So let's turn it back on. And let's see if we can reduce the effect of it. So if I go to global scale, let's set this up to 900%. Okay, so we don't seem to be affecting the snow at all. Let's have a look. Okay, so it's not turned on. Okay, so I just turned it on there now, and I can reduce the opacity. No, so just bear with me, guys. I'm just figuring this out. It's kind of trial and error a lot of the time with this stuff. Set the scale up to 1500%. Still getting some cracks here. I don't really want to see those. Let's reduce the high clip here. Okay, so that's doing it for us. Okay, so now we have no bump in our snow, and we just have the bump affecting our mountain. So that's the look we're going for. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to do for the displacement. So let's go into our displacement channel, and let's go and open up this layer shader. And I want to create a gradient, and I'm doing that so that I can create a kind of a valley that's going to cut through our mountain range. So if we just click on shader, go down to gradient, and let's open that up. Let's bring the black here, which is going to act as our valley dip. So that's going to bring our geometry down along the Y, and then the white is going to bring our geometry up. So now you can see that part of it's going up and down like that. So we need another white knot over here. So to create one, you can just click anywhere and then double click on it, and let's say it's going to be white. So now we have two white knots and a black knot in the middle. The black knot is pushing the geometry, or I should say the white knots are pushing the geometry up. Cool. So let's go back one level, and we can reduce the opacity there on that. So now it's blending in with the rest of our noise layers. So another thing we can do, if we go back into our gradient shader, is we can add some turbulence. Let's say 10%. And you can see the effect that's having. So it's creating some turbulence between our white and our black. Maybe if we go up to 15% on that. And let's have a look at what we got now. So it's quite narrow. So to increase the width of this valley, what we want to do is we want to drag this white knot out a bit. And we want to drag this white knot out a bit. Now when I say out, I mean further away from the black. And you can figure out yourselves why that's making a wider gap in the valley there. So you can also see that we got some snow going along the center of our valley where the surface is flat. So that's looking pretty good. So next we want to create our frozen river basically. So we're going to create a plane. And I'm just going to turn off my interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard, and I want to turn back on my Displacer deformer. So with your plane created, let's rename it to Frozen River, and I'm going to bring it down along the y-axis to a value of minus 85 centimeters. And I want to set the width and height to match up with our land plane. So that's going to be 1000 by 1000. And for segments, we'll leave it at... We actually don't need any segments for this. Well, we need 1 and 1, of course, so we'll just set that to 1 and 1. So let's see, where do we want this to be? We want it to be not too high. Let's go for about there. So that's set to minus 123 centimeters. Okay, cool. And I think I want to reduce the height of the valley walls here. So to do that, let's go into our land material, go into our displacement channel, into our layer shader, and let's bring down the opacity of our gradient shader there. Yeah, so that's a bit better. Maybe even a bit more. Okay. So let's turn off our displacer and let's do Alt-R on our keyboard to open up our interactive render region. Let's see what we got. Now we've got some pretty detailed mountains here, but it's going to be even more detailed once we put our land into a subdivision surface object, but we're not going to do that until the end. So for now we're going to focus on a new material for our ice. So I'm going to create a new material by double clicking down here in the materials panel, and I'm going to rename that to be frozen. I'm just going to call it ice, and I'm going to apply that to my frozen river object. Okay, so I also want to create a physical sky, so let's add in a physical sky. That's going to give us our lighting, and I want to set up a camera right now, so I'm going to create one, and I'm going to find where I want it to be, and once I'm happy with where it is, I'm going to activate it. Oh, I should have activated it first, then find where I want it to be looking. So this guy, for this part, guys, you can have your camera looking anywhere you want it to look. So I'm just gonna get it to what I feel like is a nice kind of vantage point. So I'm gonna go for around here, and I want to add a protection tag onto that so I won't be able to move it around afterwards, because I always do that by accident. Okay, so excuse me, let's go into our physical sky, and we want to set the time and location here. We're going to set it to June, and we're going to go and set the time to be about 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so let's try 11. Yeah, I'm going to go back to 10. So it's a bit dark there, but we might be able to brighten it up later on with global illumination. We'll see how it looks once we've got our ice in there. So let's open up our ice material, and we are going to select the transparency channel and make it active. We want to set the refraction preset here to be water ice, and the color is going to be set to whatever ice color is. So I'm going to go for 178 R, 210G, and 214B. Let's try that out and see what it looks like. So that's kind of icy color, I suppose. it's a bit too transparent right now. So what I'm going to do to fix that is, well, what I can do actually is add some Fresnel. So if I go into my reflectance, actually no, what I'll do is I'll add some bump. Go into your bump channel, make that active. Go to your texture triangle here and let's create a layer shader. And again, we're going to be creating a couple of layer shaders or noise shaders, just like we did in our land displacement channel. So let's create a noise shader here, and let's go into that and set the global scale to be about 20%. So it'll create some noise here on the surface of our ice. Let's actually go down to 5% on the global scale there. And let's add some reflectance. So if we go to the reflectance channel, let's add in a Beckman. And we can let's set the let's go and add our Fresnel. Go to the layer Fresnel here and let's set this to dielectric, and let's set the preset to water ice. See what that does for us. So I don't really like that, so I'm actually going to turn that off. And I want to go back to my transparency channel. I'm going to make the color a little bit more blue. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, okay, I'm liking that a bit more. Now for our bump, again, I don't want the whole surface to be covered in exactly the same kind of bump. I just want some patches of bump. And I also want to reduce the strength before I do that. I'm going to reduce the strength to 10%. And now I'm going to create some patches. So to do that, I'm going to go into in my bump channel, go into my layer shader. I'm going to create a noise shader, and I'm going to bring it beneath the noise that we have already created. I'm going to set the blending mode to layer mask, and I am going to go into that layer mask, and let's set the noise here to be, we'll go wavy turbulence. See what that looks like. And let's increase the low clip here so that we're going to reduce the amount of white, and that's going to give us our patchy bump. Yeah, so that's looking much better. Let's increase the global scale to 200, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm actually just going to go back to, I'm going to go to 120 on the global scale there. So that's looking pretty good. Our ice is still a bit transparent, a bit too transparent. So I'm going to create a cube for this actually. And I'm going to bring it down here. So let's just turn off our interactive render region for 1 minute, Alt-R on your keyboard. Let's turn back on our Displacer Deformer. And if we bring our cube down, so make sure your cube is selected. Let's bring it down to just beneath the surface there of our ice. And let's increase the scale of it to be, so we're going to set the scale here. We're going to go into the object tab of the cube. Let's set the size on the X to 500. And set the Y is fine at 200, and this on the Z you can set it to 40 centimeters. Or no, sorry, 1040 centimeters. And I want to give it the same ice material as my frozen river object. And let's turn back off our Displacer, Deformer, and let's press Alt-R on our keyboard to open up our interactive render region again. Let's see what that does for us. Okay, so that's taken away the overly transparent look of our ice, and that's looking pretty good. So for the last step, and this is going to give us way more detail in our mountains, I am going to, well, I'm going to turn off my interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard. I'm going to select my land object, hold down Alt, and then add a subdivision surface. Holding down Alt will automatically make the land object a child of the subdivision surface. And I think I'm going to render this out. I'm going to set it to 1280 by 720. You guys can bring it up to 1920 by 1080 if you want, but I'm just going to render this out now, nice and small. Current frame, I think everything's good to go. And I'm going to do a render to picture viewer on this. And that is going to render away. It's going to take a bit longer because we added our subdivision surface in, so we're going to get more detail. The render is just going to take a bit longer. So I'm going to pause the video here, and we'll have a chat about what our final render looks like when it's done. Okay guys, so that's looking pretty good. It's all about displacement and displacement shaders, and it's just about messing around with them. You know, you can get like so many different effects just by messing with displacement in Cinema 4D. It's really fun and really addictive. But that brings us to the end of the tutorial. So as always, hope you guys learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.